Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to teach you how to make a book page tumbler. So the very first thing that I want to say is that if you're accident prone like myself, I would highly recommend having a cup or a container of water nearby because you will be playing with fire in this tutorial. The other thing I want to mention is that this specific tumbler is an adult book themed tumbler, so if that is not your cup of tea, do not look too close at these pages. The first thing I'm going to start off with is the book pages themselves. I just went through and found which pages I wanted to put on this cup, and I just did a really rough kind of a ripping of those pages. I wanted to give it the most rustic look as possible, and this does not have to be done with an actual book. You could print pages off if you could find them online. This was done with a book because I like the yellowness of the pages, but it's not necessary. So the first thing I'm going to do is go around the edges with my lighter. It just takes a split second for this to happen. This is sped up just a little bit, but it's pretty close to real time. You'll notice that I'm just putting the flames out with my fingers. If your fingers are not used to heat or hotness, I would recommend using a chip brush like I am here. It doesn't hurt, for me at least, but you're definitely welcome to use a brush as opposed to your fingers for this. And I did notice here that once I used this chip brush and I put my paper on my mat and put the flame out, that I got a little bit more browning around the edges, which you'll see right here. I didn't get so much when I put it out with my fingers like that, and I actually really liked the way that looked. And I made sure to include this for some fire safety because I almost burned my house down. Once I got all of my book pages burned, I set that aside and I prepped my tumbler. You just sand it and clean it with the rubbing alcohol, wipe it off with a paper towel or coffee filter so there are no fuzzies, and then we'll get started on laying out the V-split. To measure my V-split, I just took an 8.5 by 11 piece of printer paper and I folded it to make a little triangle here. That is going to be wrapped around the top of the cup to form your V-split. This works on 20 or 30 ounce skinnies. You're just going to get a little bit of a different size V-split depending on what size cup that you use. Once I had that wrapped around the cup where I wanted it, I just took a piece of tape and taped it into place and took my fine tip Sharpie to trace along the edges of the paper. That's going to help me lay down my paint tape lines so I know where I'm going to put my book pages once I start on that. Once I marked off the V-split template, I went in with my 1-inch painter's tape and I put that above the line, not below it, because I'm going to put my book pages at the bottom half of this cup. Once I had that all taped off, I went in with my striping assistant tool. This is from the Amy's Make Everything. They have a discount code for me. It's 10% off and the code is Mitten. This is what I use for all of my stripe tumblers as well. So it's a great resource. I use this probably daily in my craft room, and they're about $10, so it's totally worth it for me. So I lined off the probably bottom 1 millimeter of this cup with tape. This is where I'm going to put my glitter. I'm not going to bring the book pages around the bottom of the cup. because it's going to cause a lot of pokey bits to stick up once I get that epoxy on because of the creases of the paper. So I'm just going to put glitter at the bottom of the cup instead of the book pages. Initially, I went in with the Crystalette glitter glue and I put it all over the bottom half of my V-split. And it took a lot longer to lay these pages down than I thought. So you'll notice that the glue dries before I have a chance to lay it down. And I did get a lot of air bubbles on here doing it this way, so you'll see me pressing those down as well. What I ended up doing after that dried is just going in one by one and gluing where I was laying the pages down, instead of keeping the entire bottom half of that cup wet with the glue. You may notice that your glue seeps through your pages, especially if you're using a thinner printer paper as opposed to book paper. That was completely okay with me. We're going to go through with some inks and make this a little bit more rustic than it already is. So once we do that, it's not going to show the glue seepage through there. Now that I've got all of my pages laid down, I'm just going to go through with a final coat of either Mod Podge or Crystalette glitter glue and let this dry overnight. And then I went around with my cup edging tool right along the painter's tape line that I had laid down to get rid of any of the book pages that laid over top of that paint. Tape. Not paint. Tape. Next, I'll be going in with my painter's tape, and in hindsight, I would have taken this tape and just put it on my clothes to kind of make it less sticky, because it did end up sticking to the book pages in a couple of spots. So I think that definitely would have helped to release the tape easier if I had done that. But if it does happen to you, just take it very, very slow. You'll see here in these next couple of clips where I put them in here at regular speed so you can see how slow I pulled this tape. So don't feel discouraged, just take your time. It's worth it in the end for it to come off without losing a ton of the work that you put into those pages. Alright, so now that I've got my cup spray painted, I'm going in with Macchiato, Athena, and Pibb from Peachy Olive Glitters. I do have a discount code for you that is Mitten10 for 10% off your order. I will put that in the description box as well. And Macchiato is one of the colors that were in the newest Peachy palette for October. I thought it would complement the gold in the vinyl and kind of accentuate the gold glitters and the browns that we're going to put on over top of the book pages. So I'm going in to do an ombre at the top half of this V-split. I did use a chunky glitter initially. You'll see later what I'm talking about. But when I am doing my ombres, I tip it at about a 45-degree angle and just let it lightly cascade down the cup to get kind of a base coat of glitter. And then I'll go and tip it the other direction at another 45-degree angle with the gold and let it kind of cascade down to the top of the cup. And then you'll notice that I go in with my finer glitter to match the burgundy and the gold, just to kind of finish it off and fill any spaces in that chunky glitter didn't lay down flat into. Okay, so here's where I'm going in with my finer cuts. I believe these are 0.08 and 0.15 cuts. This is just filling in any gaps that the glitter didn't fall into when it was laid down with the chunky glitter, and that's going to cover up any of the spray paint that you have underneath the glitter that may be peeking through. So this is Goddess and Boudoir from Peachy Olive as well. And Boudoir is a little bit darker than Pibb, but you don't notice it once it's laid down into the other glitter. Once I have all of my glitter laid down, I just tapped it to make sure all of the chunky glitter was laying flat so I don't have to do a bunch of extra coats of epoxy. And here is where I am peeling the tape at regular speed. I wanted you guys to really see how slow I'm going with this, taking my time, because I did experience that the book pages were peeling up with some of this tape. So if you start getting peeling, try to pull it from a different angle. I was able to salvage most of the pages, but again, like I said, that was being covered up with ink, so it wasn't a huge deal, but you also don't want to rip off all of the words because that's going to completely defeat the purpose of this entire cup. Now that I've got all of my painter's tape pulled, I'm going to let this sit overnight to cure. Once it's cured, I went in with 3 coats of the Krylon triple thick spray. That is a tongue twister. I did 3 coats of the spray sealer, and then I'm going to go in with Latte from Tim Holtz and Havana Brown from Piñata, and I'm just going to use a chip brush to lightly cover the book pages to give it a browner, more rustic type of a look. And you'll notice that I went a little bit heavy-handed here. and I was able to salvage that because we have a seal of the glitter glue over top of that book page. I was able to put some rubbing alcohol on my brush to kind of spread out that alcohol ink. If I hadn't sealed it, there's no way that I would have been able to do this because it would have immediately seeped right into those book pages. So I'm glad I did. I was able to salvage it, and here we go. All right, so now that we've got the inks over the book pages and I kind of spread that out, you're gonna notice in this next clip that my glitter looks a little bit different than it did in the beginning. So I had an issue with the epoxy that I used. I'm not gonna name names. But I flood coated it and it completely turned into a foggy mess. The glitter was like white basically once it was coated with epoxy. So I ended up having to retape off the book pages, and I went back in with Boudoir and Goddess that I used as my filler glitter after I did the chunky. And I ended up actually liking this color combo better than the original one. So it was kind of like a dark and moody kind of a vibe that I was going for. This ended up working way better color-wise anyways. So this cup's a little bit thick, a little bit thicker than normal, but that's why it looks different. Anyways, so I'm going in with my vinyl that was cut at 0.08 by 11.5, and this is just the gold texturized Cricut vinyl. I use this all the time for tons of my cups. It's my favorite thing ever. The initial pieces of vinyl I put right along the seam where my book pages and my glitter met to cover that seam. I trimmed off the top and bottom points of the V-split, and then I went in with my second and third sets of those vinyl pieces. Those are also 0.08 by 11.5. And the second set that I laid down, I let the bottom crisscross. We're gonna trim along the brown glitter line at the very base of that cup, and leave it crisscrossing below where the V-split meets, if that makes sense. We're gonna trim the top, and then on this third set of vinyl striping that I'm laying down, we're gonna crisscross the bottom again, and once you come up over the top of the cup, we are not going to trim that, and we're gonna let that crisscross as well. Now that I've got my top portion of the cup wrapped in vinyl. I'm going around with the same vinyl, 0.08 by 11.5, and covering the seam between the book pages and the Macchiato glitter that we put at the bottom of this cup. And in hindsight, I would have started with this vinyl at the bottom because it would give a good foundation or a stopping point to kind of cut off the seams of those crisscrossed vinyls that we placed on the top half of that cup. But it worked out anyways, so not a big deal. Next, we are going in with this decal. This was 3 inches wide. I'm not sure on the height of this, but I had to make it a little bit smaller than I had initially planned. I typically do all of my decals at 3.5 inches, and because we had the crisscrossed vinyl striping, it ended up overlapping. So I had to cut this a little bit smaller. This is the 3 inches. And we are going to lay that on the top half with the glitter portion. I didn't want to cover up any of the book pages, so we're going to do this right at the top. And this is the same gold textured Cricut vinyl that I used with the pinstriping. Once I got all of my vinyl work laid down, I put this cup on my turner and put a coat of polyacrylic sealer over top of it. I let that spin for about 30 minutes until it was dry to the touch. That's just to ensure that none of the vinyl work that we've put down is going to lift once the epoxy goes on. Once that was dry, I went in with 2 final coats of epoxy and this cup was finished.